All right, so it's Dr. Gianna Reams, and we are here for our second interview with my friend and colleague, Sabine Müller. I'm so excited to have Sabine here because, well, I'll get to that in one of the other questions, but I'm going to let her introduce herself so that I don't butcher the name of her university.
Thank you very much, Tijana, and you won't butcher it again. Not at all, because I know that your German is much better than my English, so I have to apologize for my English. And it is Marburg University, and it's in Germany.
Yeah. How long have you been there?
Ever since 2015.
Okay,
So,
and where were you? You were where before that? You were at another place before.
Innsbruck University at Austria.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, our first question for the interview, and I like to ask a little bit about, just so folks know who are watching, I like to ask our scholars a little bit about their background so that we feel like human beings to you and that we didn't just kind of magically, we're not talking heads here. We have a background. So, how did you end up in ancient history and specifically studying Alexander and Macedonia?
It all started in my childhood when I was a very small child. I couldn't even read myself at this time, and my father showed me some comic series of Mickey Mouse stuff. And there was a mummy, an ancient mummy, chasing Donald Duck. And I asked my father, what is a mummy? Because I didn't know. My father, who loved history and museums, he took me to a museum and showed me an ancient Egyptian mummy. And then he looked at books about ancient Egypt together with me. And so he fueled my interest in history. And so I studied ancient history, and then I met Gerhard Wirth, my teacher, and he was famous as an Alexander scholar in Germany. So this is my way.
Yeah. I'm always interested by how much like public history or non-specialists things like you were talking about Donald Duck of all things gets you into ancient history, that these little things are what pop up interest with us as much as anybody else. That's how we get dragged into it. Um, all right, so I sometimes joke I have not really written a paper if I don't cite you at least once. Partly, you have a huge number of publications. You're younger than me and you have outpublished me by twice as much. We tend to track on similar topics, although not entirely. But to my mind, one of your more important books isn't on Alexander, but on Perdikkas II. This is a Macedonian king, for those of you who are listening, who he was king for most of, not the end, but most of the Peloponnesian War. Unfortunately, for Anglophones like me, it's in German. So that's kind of why I wanted to focus on it for this interview, to kind of let Anglophones know about this super important book on Perdiccas. What got you to write this book?
Yeah, so thank you very much, and sorry for all the Anglophone readers. I promise my next book will be in English, I promise. But Perdikkas II, I really I got fond of him when I had to write a book on the Argeads in general, all the Argeads, and then I began to notice how important he was to Macedonian history. And I love survivors, people who have to fight all of their lives, and this is what he did. He was a fighter, he was a survivor, and he never gave up. And I think he is so underestimated. He is in the shadow of his father, Alexander I, and also in the shadow of the later Argeads. And so I really wanted people to notice how important and what kind of a fighter this man was. So he is really my favorite Argead of all times.
Yeah, I remember Gene used to focus on him saying he made Macedon survive that war. Without Perdiccas, it would have been eaten by the southern stuff. And kind of moving from that, again, Gene focused on him. There were these three pre-Philip, pre-Alexander Argead kings. Alexander I, who's you're working on now, Perdiccas, and then Archelaus. And Gene used to say that Perdiccas is the most underrated Macedonian king. Um, do you want to expand on a little bit on that? And also, well, let's stop there with that, and then I'll get into sources for him.
Yes, of course. He was so underestimated, and this is exactly the source problem because the main source for his reign is Thucydides, and Thucydides really he blackens his portrait because he wrote from the Athenian point of view, and of course from the Athenian point of view, Perdikkas was an unreliable ally who did not care much for Athens but only for Macedonia. And he was also a villain in Thucydides' eyes because his major disaster in his life was when he lost Amphipolis for Athens, Thucydides,
Yeah.
and Perdikkas was also partly responsible for this loss of Amphipolis, and this I think that Thucydides never forgot this, and so he made a villain of poor Perdikkas, and this is
Right.
really his judgment was very influential in scholarship, but also I think in the popular view of Perdikkas. So, and this is what we as experts on Macedonia really want to do, want to look behind the Greek perspectives.
Yes, yes. Quickly, what is Amphipolis for people who have no idea?
Um, this means that he is, Thucydides wrote the history on the Peloponnesian War, and he only mentioned Perdikkas when he crossed the way of Athens. So, and of course, mostly in a hostile way, because Athens tried to be the supreme power in the north at this time, and he really had to take care of his Macedonia, that it wasn't, it did not become a part of the Athenian Empire.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And Amphipolis is a city there in the north
oh, Amphipolis,
that
yes,
yeah.
and Amphipolis. Sorry, I forgot the question.
That's okay.
To, I was so into the Athenian point of view that I forgot your question. I'm so sorry. Amphipolis was foundation of the Athenians, right next to the domain, the royal domain of Perdikkas. So he was threatened by the sudden advance of Athens, and of course, it was in his interest to free Amphipolis from the Athenians. And together with the Spartan ally, Brasidas, they managed to free Amphipolis from Athens. And for Thucydides, who at this time was on Athenian mission right before Amphipolis, he was asked to save Amphipolis, and he came too late, and so he got trialed and was exiled for the rest of his life from Athens, and this was really it ruined his political and military career, and this was a point why he seems to have hated Perdiccas.
Yeah. Yeah, you ruined my life, dude. Ah, anyway, all right. So, on this channel, if anybody has watched any of the videos, they know that I deal a lot with sources because we have to. So you talked a little about the problems with Perdiccas, or I'm sorry, with Thucydides and Perdiccas's reign. And in the book, Oh, and if you've got a copy, hold it up so people can see it. Um, there it is. Um, as part of it, you discuss a lot because you deal with sources very deeply, and the specific problem of Athenian distortion, not just in Thucydides. You talk about it in Plato and other things. And then, of course, when you're dealing with Alexander and Philip, you do the same. So, how do you see that Athenian distortion in our surviving sources affecting common perceptions of Perdikkas, yes, Macedon, especially among non-Macedonian specialists? So we've always got our little radars up going, what are they saying bad about Macedon and are they lying? But what are some of the, I guess, persistent myths about Macedon, especially this early Macedon, that you would most like to see die?
Oh, man,
So
I can
many, I know, I know.
any question. You will have experienced stories like this too, because I once went to a conference and there were all the Macedonian specialists such as Steph Carney and Yossi Roisman and Waldemar Heckel, and then there were the Greek experts, and they were sitting there very moody, sorry, and disgruntled, and they were looking at us so. Oh my goodness. And then one of them said in a very not friendly voice, look at these. These are the Macedonian bunch. The Macedonian bunch. As if we were some gangsters, and they really made us sound as if we were going to punch them up.
Oh, that's
And then,
hysterical. That is so funny. You know, and Ernst Badian named us Macedonias, so not in a bad way. That was, yeah, years ago, Ernst said he gave us a name, so Gene passed it down. So we are Macedonias. So yes, we are a mob.
and there was another and then they said to me, and they were giving us wine, and I don't drink any wine. I don't like wine. So, and he said to me, "Oh, you are doing research on Alexander, so you must drink all the time wine. I don't think you and give you this." And he passed me. I've never seen such a huge glass of wine, such a huge glass of wine. Oh, you must love it because you're doing research on Alexander. So all these horrible cliches. I want to have the cliche die that the Macedonians are hillbillies, that they are drunkards, that Alexander wanted to deify himself during his lifetime,
Yes,
which is
yes, not true. Yes, maybe be a hero, but that's not a
not exactly. And Perdikkas, I really want to get rid of this scholarly myth that at the beginning of his reign, in his so-called Dark Ages, that he was only one of three sons of Alexander I who got the reign, and that he stole the other parts of the reign from his brothers. This is nonsense, and it's not confirmed by any source. It's a scholarly reconstruction that is not true, and this is really what I want to. I want to never hear of it again. It's not true.
god. Yes. So, what are some of the other, particularly Athenian distortions you ran into?
Yeah, this is of course the comic poet Hermippos, and it's also famous in popular view of Perdikkas because Hermippos wrote this comedy, and we have the fragment that he tells us that to the Athenian port there are ships from Perdikkas with a shipload full of lies, shiploads full of lies. So yes, the in and out liar, the Perdikkas, and everybody, because everybody laughs about this. Oh, he sends ships full of lies. He is really stigmatized as the liar, and this is really distorting, as you say. Thucydides, of course, he tries to style him as the unreliable ally, flip flopping from one alliance to another which is not true. And then Plato does not really distort his image, because all these things about Perdikkas and stealing from his brother are part of a speech by Polos, and Polos is a pupil of Gorgias, and Gorgias is the bad guy in Plato, because he was a sophist. He took money for his teaching, and this is of course the counter image of Socrates, who never took money, allegedly never took money for teaching.
Allegedly, yes. He took a lot of dinners and he took a lot of other things, you know. But it's part of that blackening of the mercenary, you know. So anybody who's getting paid, and that's such an elite upper class attitude. And of course, what Plato's an Alcmeonid. So right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so and stop me at any point if you want to talk further and I interrupt you. Um, the again, in what I've talked about here, including archaeology, one source type that I haven't really discussed much, mostly it's not my jam, is coinage. Coins are your jam more, you and Bill and Johannes. So, can you explain why coins matter for historians, archaeologists, the viewers, that they're not this boring thing, that they are hugely important for us?
to do this, because especially when it comes to Argead, Macedonia, they are mostly the only contemporary sources that we have, um, providing us with the Argead point of view. This is we get an information how the Argead wanted to be seen and which program they wanted to promote via this ancient mass media of coins. And
Mhm.
so, and we also learn a lot. So if I can just show some of Perdikkas coins, I don't don't have them here in my hand, but also um,
Yeah.
you can see this, I hope. And these are the coins for Macedonia proper, and they show that he has to have military skills as an Argead ruler, and this is of course in his time or always it's very important. And these are the coins that were going to his allies around Macedonia, Chalkidian cities and such. And it's interesting that these are of a higher standard, so they have more silver than those of Macedonia. And
Oh,
this
uh-huh.
teaches us, yeah, this teaches us that at Macedonia, he was so his power was so consolidated that he could give out coins with lighter silver, and they were accepted. But he knew the allies would have been more problematic. So this is um, the heavier series of predictors for his allies. So he was so tricky. So you can learn such things about this, and um, this is really interesting. And we see that he has the Macedonian rider. This is
Yeah.
a very famous, and he adopted this from his father, who was the first to mint coins in Macedonia. And so this is also a legitimizing device to say, I walk into my father's footsteps, and so he is my father. I'm his son. We are both the same qualities, and keep calm.
Right, keep
Every
calm and carry on. Yeah, and Alexander did that too at the right after Philip died at the League. He says the same thing. Only the king has changed. And and he keeps going in the same. The Macedonian writer or the writer in general, and we see them up in Thrace. Can you talk briefly and tell viewers what is that symbol? Or
yeah,
that demigod, whatever he is?
yeah. I, the opinions are divided. I think that Macedonian rider is really symbolizes the ideal Argead ruler, so kind of abstract thing, and that he's he shows the people that he keeps his population safe. He's a fighter, he's a warrior, he's a hunter, and it's of course you said it. This is a coin image known from Byzantine ethnic groups and from Thracian ethnic groups, and we don't know exactly what it means, if it's a hero or something like this. But I think it shows, of course, the cultural influences. And what we know is that this Macedonian writer, when Alexander adopted it, it also refers to Potidaia. It's a Greek city on the Chalkidiki, and they have a writing Poseidon on their coins, and it's very closely connected to this coin image. So
Yeah,
it might
interesting.
they were allied. And Perdikkas was also allied with Potidaia, so uh, this might be an explanation why he helped them when Athens attacked Potidaia. So this is interesting.
That's super interesting. I did not know that about the writer on Potadian coinage. So cool. And of course, again, for viewers who are not aware, we think of Poseidon as a sea god, but he's also, of course, the god of horses. So obvious tie-in. It strikes me whenever I was looking at the writer image up in Thrace, they seem to be popping up later than we see them in some cases in Macedonia. So the notion that the writer somehow came south from Thrace into Macedonia may not be true. It may be going, there may be a lot more overlap there than just the cultural overlap that I saw up there between their imagery and Macedonian imagery in the archaeology is enormous. They're so clearly talking to each other. And we don't know about it because Athens isn't writing about it, which is really frustrating. It is like, well, I want a Macedonian source, damn it. Okay, so a little bit on coins. Now, in the book, you discuss Perdiccas's Macedonian background, his father, the first Alexander, and their role in the Persian War. And I know that you and Johannes are currently working on that book on Alexander the First. So, can you say a little bit about the Macedon that Perdiccas inherited from Daddy? As you see, what was Macedon at that point?
Consolidated, and it was deeply embedded in widespread networks with Greece, with the Chalkidians, also with Persia, because the sister of Alexander the First had married into the famous Phrygian house of the satrapal family residing in Daskyleon. So there were
Mhm.
networks everywhere around the Mediterranean world, and Alexander the First was a diplomatic genius, and we see that he had connections with Argos, with Athens, also with Sparta. He invited Pindar and Baxylides, very famous poets, and he had guest friendships. And Perdikkas all inherited these networks and a very consolidated consolidated realm. The problem was that Athens was coming close and expanding her influence during this time. And this was his problem. His inheritance would have been a very good inheritance.
Yeah. I can hardly wait to see what you do with Alexander the First because I've been waiting for a good biography of him for a long time, and he's such a colorful figure. But in thinking of again father-son stuff, we talk about, and this is all I'm going off script here a little bit. We talk a lot about Alexander in the shadow of Philip, but we don't think as very much about Perdiccas in the shadow of the first Alexander. What do you think it was like for him growing up? I can almost hear him, Alexander supposedly said, Daddy's not leaving anything for me to do. And I can just hear Perdiccas saying the same thing. Daddy's not leaving anything for me to do. You know? It-
Yeah, I know. Ah, what I always thought when I was working on Perdikkas was, oh my goodness, he's such like his father. He is really like his father. He has exactly the diplomatic genius of his father. And I think that Alexander taught Perdikkas how to do politics, how to be a
Mhm.
good diplomat. So I think he really is uh, uh, the absolutely right um, successor of um, his father, and he really resembled him in so many instances. So I think he really he was perhaps he also he loved his father because he really he tried to preserve all of his memories and the iconography of empire that Alexander
Yeah.
um, established and the courtly culture he established. So he was probably very grateful to his father, and he really he was like his father. So yeah, very close perhaps. Both of them.
Yeah. Again, I wish we had, say, Marcius's history of Macedonia or something. I would love to know what a Macedonian had to say about these guys. Um, from your point of view, what do you think are some of the most significant controversies around Perdiccas's reign?
Mhm. One, of course, is what I mentioned before, the so-called Dark Ages of Perdikkas, the
Yeah.
stolen myth that he was not the sole ruler when he succeeded to his father, but that allegedly Alexander the First divided his realm into three parts, and Perdikkas, his brothers Philip and his other brother Achaetas got a part, and Perdikkas stole their parts, and then became only the sole monarch after a while. And this is absolutely nonsense. And the Argead monarchy was a monarchy. Monos means one. Of course, there was only one ruler traditionally, and also, oh, Perdikkas is the only one who coined, uh, who minted coins from the beginning
Right.
of his reign.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You cannot argue against this. And so all the people thinking that there were two others, this is again the Plato passage that when Polos tells nonsense and Socrates says, I don't agree to anything you say, to anything. So it's all wrong. So, and this is, the other is Thucydides when he tells us that Philip tried to win back the Argead, so the rule. But what Philip is the brother of Perdikkas, and he revolted against his brother, but he wanted, of course, all of the rule and all of the power, not only a part. So it's there were no there was no division of the realm after Alexander's death. This is really nonsense. And the other very big controversy is about the Athenians when they allied with Perdikkas and tried to attack Poteidaia. And on the way back, Perdikkas switched alliances. And there is
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
problematic passage in Thucydides. There is something that is lost or something that is misspelled in the manuscripts, and so we are told that the Athenians attacked a city, and it might have been either Brea. It would be no problem to Perdikkas because Brea was an Athenian city, or they attacked Beroia, and Beroia was one of his cities, and this would be the reason why he switched alliances because it was so the Athenians would have been so cocky to attack one of his cities while he was their ally and while he was accompanying them to help them to attack Poteidaia. So this is a huge controversy. And Miltiades Hassopoulos now has argued that we have in a newly found inscription from
Ah,
later times that we have a clue or a proof that there was exactly a route a royal road leading exactly the way down from where they came and through to Beroia. So there would have been really a chance that they attacked Beroia, and
Hmm.
this really explain why Perdikkas switched alliances, and there were other reasons for them, but this is one of the huge controversies.
One of the things that strike me as you're saying that, and again, I'm going to go off script for just a minute, is how close Varoya is relatively to Pydna. And we know they went after Pydna later. Do you think they were maybe interested in all of that area there? Is that why you think they attacked Varoya?
According to Miltiades Hatzopoulos, they were trying to get communication lines to
Uh,
Elymea because
oh,
there who was another ally of Philip and of the Athenians at this point of time,
right.
and that
Yeah.
this is the argument. So. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and of course we hear about the Elamaean cavalry fighting separately from the Macedonian cavalry, which and just for viewers, a reminder, Macedonia at this point didn't necessarily have those upper kingdoms. They were important kingdoms of their own, Lynkestis, Elamea, eventually Orestis, all of those, and Orestis that was allied with um, Dodon's group, wasn't it? I think early on, if I remember right.
Yes, I
You were more in this area recently than I was, but yeah, that Philip, not Philip, sorry, Perdiccas was fighting with the Lynkestians a bunch. So these are different. Yeah, they're whole different things. So
yeah,
it's not the big, huge United Kingdom that Philip pulled in later necessarily. Getting to the heart, what I think of as kind of the heart of that book, of that whole 100 pages that you devote to Perdiccas, and I thought it was really interesting the and versus Athens that you put these together, there must be some way out of here. And I had to ask you because immediately what pops to my mind is the Bob Dylan song "All Along the Watchtower," and you talk about the Chalkida Key and how that figures into that. Say a little bit about that because that's
yeah.
a lot of research in that chapter, a lot.
Oh, thank you. And yes, of course, it's Bob Dylan's All Along the
Okay,
Watchtower.
good, good. It is. Yes, I was not off my rocker. All right.
Well, I really love this song, and
Mhm.
every time I listen to it, and when I wrote this book, I was thinking um, the Joker was Perdikkas, and
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, okay, yeah. Just so you know, my brother is a lot older than I was, and so he and my sister-in-law got married when I was very young. And they were very much children of the 60s. And I grew up, I cut my eye teeth on Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and all of those. And so at one point I knew tons of Bob Dylan songs. So yeah, so that's a natural language for me. I totally speak it. I speak Bob Dylan, you know.
we we in England, in our school in Germany, we had Bob Dylan lyrics in our English classes. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Okay. Well,
we,
he's an awesome poet. He's an awesome poet. As well as, I mean, well, songwriter, poet, whatever. Same thing.
yeah, he is
Okay.
our English teacher. She studied in America, so she was absolutely a huge fan of Bob Dylan, and so we were because his texts were so yeah. They are important texts, as you said. He's a poet, and every time I listen to it, because my boyfriend Johannes,
Huh.
Johannes, he also loves Bob Dylan, and
Okay.
every time I heard the the words, there must be some way out of here, said the Joker to the thief, and I imagined this is Perdikkas speaking to Sitalkes, the Thracian ruler who had so much trouble with Athens, and they tried to figure out, my goodness, we are really encircled by the Athenian
Hmm.
power. There
Hmm.
must have been some way out of here. So this was my association with this, and because he was also such a joker-like figure, always having a new idea. And this is what you asked me about the Chalkidians, and he used
Hmm.
them to form a huge counter alliance against the Athenians. So he offered them a piece of his royal land to settle there during the war, and he tried to create a power block against the
Mhm.
Athenians. And he also allied with Italcus, the Thracian ruler, and he gave him his sister in a political marriage to create a strong power against the Athenians. And so this was Joker-like figure for me, but in a very positive sense, not the bad Joker, but the clever Joker. So
Yeah,
something.
exactly. Yes, yes, very much so. And that balancing act, to my mind, that you go into that he is doing there in order, as you put it, to get this power block against Athens, because of their, reaching up there into the north and their Thracian alliances, etc. That that I think you really cement in the book just how good Perdikkas is at thinking around corners and how to handle Athenian aggression in the north.
Yes, he was. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It hits the nail on the head. And there were, of course, times when, oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
kidding.
yes, we have a visitor here.
Oh,
If
wonderful.
viewers see a black tail, that's Cecilia. Or by the way, her name is Cecilia Iphigenia. Never ask a classicist to name a cat, you know. Anyway. Ah,
Where was I? Because I was
yeah.
so distracted by the screen.
Perdikkas is balancing act.
Yeah, exactly. So there were times, of course, when he found no allies to form the power bloc against Athens, so he had to ally with Athens again in order to survive. And it's very interesting that I retraced his steps as an Athenian ally recently, and it was perfect, but he did nothing. Really, if they wanted his help, he said not urgent, and he really he did nothing, and he waited and he waited, or he did not bend over backwards to help them, and waited until the time came to form another alliance against them. So it was really clever. So he really in Athenian eyes, of course, this was not the ideal ally, but what other could the poor man do? So, yeah.
Right, right. We gotta keep the kingdom free. Um, so what do we know about Perdiccas's end? Because he doesn't survive all the way to the end of the war. His son Archelaus comes to the throne. Again, going back to Plato and his unreliable narrator stuff. Plato really goes after Archelaus, doesn't like him. He's blackened in the Athenian sources again. How do you see that turnover of power in in reality versus the popular narrative we've got of Archelaus kind of offing his younger brother, etc. And again portraying the Macedonians consistently as unreliable allies, the ship of lies you referred to, etc. That they are just, you can't trust them, can't turn your back on them. So what happened to Perdiccas and how did Archelaus come to the throne?
Mhm. Unfortunately, we don't know really much about Perdikkas' last years. We know that at the end, the poor man had to be an Athenian ally again, and he helped, but not very much, the Athenians to win back Amphipolis, and this was a failure. They never won back Amphipolis. And the interesting question is always how much did Perdikkas switch alliances? And there are different numbers. You told me that Jean Borza said 11 times.
He counted 11, but I've heard other numbers at various points. So, yes.
I also read that some people, Jeremy Minot said 9 times, and I tried to calculate this, and he ruled about 40 years. So,
Yeah, okay.
so a very long time, and half of this was in times of war. So,
Yeah,
and I counted, and he was in alliance with Athens 5 times, and 2 times the Athenians were absolutely guilty of breaking the alliance themselves. So,
yeah,
and there was 2 times an alliance with Sparta, and
yeah.
so this is not so much, and um, so um, this
Yeah, I think Gene was counting total various switches, including Sparta, but yeah, I have not made any attempt to count them, so I will take y'all's word for it. But that itself is that back and forth goes back to what he's trying to do with balancing
yeah,
the power to keep Macedonia free. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And Archelaus, he was seems to have been the successor he wanted to have very early, because he appears in an inscription that we have from Athens.
Hmm.
Um, when there was again a peace treaty between Perdikkas and Athens, and he appears as the signatory among all the other Argeads. So he was very high ranking. This
Right,
is
right.
seen as, yeah, as an indicator of his high rank at court. And of course, he was the legitimate son. You know, everybody at the court knew that all the sons of the king, even if he lived polygamously, were of course legitimate, and because he had many wives, probably ever since Alexander the First. We don't know for sure, but we think so. And so he was the legitimate heir. And again, this what you mentioned, this horrible stuff about him killing his little brother and being a slave of his uncle, is this nonsense that Gorgias' pupil tells in Plato, and Plato makes fun of Polus, and Socrates says, no, 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 I don't believe a thing you say. And of course, Archelaus came to the throne, and the Athenians really loved him, because the Athenians had lost their fleet during the Sicilian expedition, and then we have sources that Archelaus, he gave them timber to rebuild their fleet, and he also
Hmm.
gave them ships built in Macedonia. And Alcibiades proposed a honorary decree for him, and he was honored as a benefactor and as a friend of the Athenian people. So he was closely connected with the Athenian upper class, with the Socratic circle, with Alcibiades, with Theramenes, and also with other people forming part of the Socratic circle. And he was also, his portrait is very positive in Thucydides, and the Athenians loved him. So the only exception to this very positive image is this speech of
Right.
Polus, and makes fun of Polus. So he, they loved him because of the timber. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like going back to Alexander the First as the Philhellene. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I had something else I was going to ask, and now I can't remember what it was. All right. Well, obviously, as my grandmother used to say, if you can't remember, it wasn't important. So, any teasers you want to give on what you're working on now on Alexander the First?
Yeah. Together with Johannes, I will, of course, dig deeper into his networks, what we were talking about, and we'll try to show what a diplomatic genius he was, and of course, how he tried to save um, his Macedonia from being punished, because he formed part of the Persian side in the Persian Wars, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, after that he had to try to save his realm from punishment, and we will try to get him the attention he really deserves.
Yes, there are other Macedonian kings besides Alexander the Third. He's the third. Oh, I know what it was in that you mentioned the polygamy. So real
Yeah,
quick, because you also another thing for viewers, Sabina does a lot with Macedonian women. You're kind of Beth's successor in that regard, you and Monica
my
D'Agostini. Um,
exactly. That is my teacher. She was one of my teachers, so I owe my whole academic career.
Explain the polygamy because there's another thing a lot of people don't understand. The Macedonians, and that goes into that story about Archelaus. He's not really a true heir. Um, how does Macedonian polygamy work
Mhm.
insofar as we could figure it out?
Yeah, this is a political instrument in order to create as much alliances with elites as possible. And if you can only marry one woman, it's bad for your alliance system. So
Yeah,
it's much better to have many wives. And of course, every son or every daughter um, they bear is a legitimate child. But this is, of course, a problem for Greek and Roman authors who live who live in monogamy, and they don't understand this. And polygamy is really very important to have a lot of potential successors because, of course, children tend to die early in these times. And of course, it was really a thing of policy. It's a political instrument, and I always try to say to my students in ancient Macedonian court, if the ruler comes and says, "This, I am Philip, and these are my 7 wives," everybody would have thought, "Oh, he must be a good politician." So it's really it's a sign, and marriages, they are political marriages. They serve to create or cement, intensify alliances, and also to pacify conquered regions, and to seal peace treaties, to get very, very many phases of political marriages.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
very useful.
And again, as you said, not everybody understands that. And I also think sometimes people assume, even if they grant that Philip was polygamous, they don't realize Philip didn't make it up. You know, prior Macedonian kings were doing the same thing. They may not have had seven, but they had multiple wives. So
Yeah.
it's not unique or new. And the reason I really like talking about Perdikkas, Alexander, Archelaus, um, is it's a good reminder that Macedon didn't spring suddenly to life with Philip.
Yeah.
It has a much longer history in
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Any last things you want to say about Perdiccas or early Macedon or anything?
I can only say that through my recent research, I was never really so interested or so much interested in Archelaus before. He was not one of my favorites. My favorite was Perdikkas or Alexander the First, and Philip, of course, and Alexander, and our Hephaestion, of course. But then I realized how much he tried, Archelaus, how much he tried to get into this Athenian circle with all these Socratic members, and
Interesting.
it's interesting, and how he tried to connect with all the guys around Alcibiades, and how he did this, and how he tried to make them see that also Macedonia is not a hinterland, something like this, but it's
Yeah,
also yeah, and he gave his best to do this, and he became part of this very upper class Athenian elite circle, and this really impressed
interesting.
me. So this was so my new discovery for me. So um, well, yes.
I feel another article coming out of this. So, but that's it. I hadn't really thought about that until you were phrasing that. It's like, yeah, yeah, that actually fits. Okay, so I'm going to go off script. Real quick question. Why do you think Socrates didn't go up there whenever he was invited? Any
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
I think he was invited, and he didn't go up because he would have ruined his reputation as not uh, really someone who lived ascetic and who really only served the Athenian city and something like this. He would
Okay.
have really ruined his image. You can say his image. So.
Optics, optics. I love it. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for doing this.
Perfect.
And go read her material that is in English. I am going to link to, you have your CV online anywhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
My
We'll link to that and again your academia.edu, the material that you're allowed to publish there, and then your books. Many of the books are in German. If you can read German, go read it. This is the problem. You don't need to apologize to the Anglophiles for not writing in English. We need to apologize for not speaking more languages. That is an American, not just American, really. It's a problem for a lot of Anglophones. We don't teach languages early enough in our schools, so we never get any good at it. Um, and I wish I was better at German and French and other stuff than like you guys are. I could never do this interview. If you were doing this interview in German, I couldn't do it. So again, I thank you very much for coming on, and we hopefully I can drag you back later to talk about something else. Maybe we can stage a fun debate or something on Hephaestion at some point, and that would be
okay.
fun. And that where we agree, where we don't agree, because and especially anybody follows me on Tumblr, the number of times that I mention you, you have a small fan base over there, by the way. Of people who, that I mentioned, you got to go read Sabina's stuff. She says something different. We have differences, but we can be friends and have differences. And that's one of the things that I think is really important to model for folks that we just you read the sources differently and come up with different things. And then we talk, where we agree. But anyway, that can be a fun thing for another day. So again,
Oh yeah.
thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.